So check this out. I was up watching the late news as I'm a second shift worker, uh, and you know I had heard about the Title 42. They continue to say it's the Trump era. The Trump era ban of wasn't necessarily. I guess it was a ban from um, immigrants seeking amnesty in America, you know, due to the coronavirus outbreak. So that was scheduled to end. I mean, it was scheduled to end once before. I guess that was during the midterms, and now it's well, no, I think it was scheduled to end. Scheduled to end. It was scheduled to end, but yesterday we had heard that they had decided to push it back for some months. So I left it at that. And you know, and I guess you know, in the back of my mind, yeah, we knew that people were going to it was going to be issues because due to the fact that I live in Chicago, and Chicago is a sanctuary city. You know, I mean, I don't know what vote was made for that, but our government officials decided that Chicago is a sanctuary city, and I think that was to spite Donald Trump during his presidency, because you know, I guess it's the typical left wing, right wing of the left wing, right wing of the same political bird. But not to get too lost in the politics of it, but I guess it's all politics. So basically, this Title 42 was supposed to end, and with ending, then the stipulations in order to cross the border and receive amnesties would have been lifted. And by that happening, there would have been an immediate influx. New York said that they were going to be receiving somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 new immigrants per week in their city. Now, there's also an issue going on in my city, in my particular city of Chicago, where there's a particular neighborhood. In this council meeting, I've seen mostly black people in this council meeting. But what they've done is they have $1.2 million to renovate a school, and they're renovating the school for the purpose of housing immigrants. I guess seeking amnesty in America. But that's not the point I'm getting to. The point I'm getting to is that the DHS has warned of domestic violence extremist threats related to end of Title 42. The Department of Homeland Security recently warned of potential domestic violent extremist acts related to the anticipated lifting of Trump-era border restrictions, according to a memo obtained by CNN, just days before the termination of those limits was halted by the Supreme Court. Now, I guess they already knew, well, that if it was going to be halted, if they were not going to lift the ban, it would have something to do with some of the information they had already received days before. So far, we have observed calls for attacks targeting primary migrants and critical infrastructure, but our insight into DVE plotting is constrained by these individuals' use of online security measures to limit exposure to law enforcement, reads the memo. Now, what that just says is that, you know, they observe calls. They can't really get enough solid information because whoever is doing this conspiring has considerable online security measures in place. Threats against the United States are increasingly unpredictable and complex amid a host of conspiracy theories, foreign interference, and calls for violence. Wow, they got this covered. 2019 shooting in El Paso. Let me see if I can close this. I didn't even let it close it. The 29 shooting in El Paso, Texas, they killed 23 people and left another 23 wounded. Authorities said at the time that the accused shooter drove to the West Texas border city with the sole intent of killing immigrants and Mexicans. Now, from this has always been, and I guess the earliest I think of remembering is during W. Bush's term when they had given amnesty for immigrants. And during that time, the Democratic Party was against it. Nancy Pelosi had spoken out. I think Chuck Schumer had also spoken out against this amnesty for immigrants. So then it goes to Obama, and underneath Obama, I guess even with the CARES, was it the Dream Act or whatever, the Dreamer Act, even with that in place, he still had expelled, turned away, deported. That's the word I'm looking for. Deported more immigrants than W. Bush had, or I guess any other recent president had. So at that point, it wouldn't. I guess it wasn't a particular issue in regards to. I guess for some political ideologies, say protect our borders. In that regard, it's not. What I'm trying to say here in this point is that they make it seem as if it's a left wing or a right wing dispute, when both of them have at one particular time, depending on their political interests, veered toward immigration. But but let me continue. But what I'm really saying is that these people, and I being a black person myself, I can pretty much assure myself that the people that they are studying in regards to making these threats aren't African American, Black, Negro, or people of color. So let's go here. Let me continue. The December memo obtained by CNN focuses on the lifting of a public health authority known as Title 42, which has been a source of tension between Democrats and Republicans and linked to a surge of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border. Since the onset of the coronavirus pandemic, the public health order has allowed officials to turn away thousands of migrants encountered along the U.S. southern border, marking an unprecedented break from previous protocols. The Biden administration was initially on track to end Title 42 on December 21st to comply with a lower court order. In anticipation of Title 42, DHS observed chatter about potential violence directed toward migrants and other targets. The bulletin from the Department's Office of Intelligence and Analysis is dated 4 days before the Supreme Court said Title 42 will remain in effect. So, let me read that again. The bulletin from the Department's Office of Intelligence and Analysis is dated 4 days before the Supreme Court said Title 42 will remain in effect while legal challenges play out, a process that will take months. The December memo cites violent tactics discussed among social media users against migrants, including firearm attacks, the placement of landmines along migration routes, and luring migrants into trailers to poison them with gas. Now, once again, I wanna think in the history of the African American Black Negro person, and not necessarily. I mean, these people obviously have, whether they may be considered sound of mind or not, they feel threatened by an influx of immigrants across the American border. You have to consider the fact that we are underneath pretty much a recession. They won't label it as a recession, and I guess in their mind they may see the lack of economic the lack of economic health. Let's say good economic health. The lack of resources and just certain other particular issues. We are still underneath the pandemic, I believe. But so these people, these plans, they said placement of landmines. Now I don't know, y'all, and I'm not an expert. I'm just asking. Hypothetically, not even necessarily wanting an answer. Does anybody know any black? Well, somebody might know. Some black people might have landmines. Don't answer that in the comments if you comment on this. But we have not previously observed calls for a substation. We have not previously observed calls for substation attacks in response to immigration-related concerns, and these recent discussions may stem from widespread media coverage of recent attacks against other substations across the United States, particularly in Monroe, North Carolina, the memo reads. CNN has reached out to DHS for a comment. DHS also acknowledges in the memo that domestic violent extremists have historically cited immigration-related grievances to justify violence, and notes the militia groups have previously interfered with border operations. The other story that I read as spoke in regards to the was more detail in regards to the substation attack. This is CBS. That was CNN. CNN sometimes, pretty much often, very often, kind of is a lightweight, bullshit version of the story. I guess I should have picked the more recent one anyway. I'm trying to get to the point. Okay. All right. The discussions may stem upon widespread media coverage of recent attacks against other substations across the United States, particularly in Monroe, North Carolina, the bulletin added. The deliberate attack on 2 North Carolina substations cut the power for more than 45,000 people early this month, shifting public attention to vulnerabilities present in the United States power grid. Days later, an individual opened fire near a Duke Energy facility at Water Tree Hydro Station in Ridgeway, South Carolina. Law enforcement has cited concern that the attacks could be followed by copycat incidents in other parts of the nation. Now, according to the bulletin, grievances over immigration policy and animosities toward immigrants have previously fueled extremist acts, including the 2019 Walmart shootings in El Paso, Texas, that killed 23 people and left another 23 people wounded. That's what was cut off in the other article. All I can say is this, man. You see, even if you just go as simply as keeping the order in place because we're still underneath the pandemic. Because in other news, China has, I guess the United States has reenacted the travel restrictions if you choose to go to China, but I think it's pretty much in reverse now. At first, China was real iffy about letting outsiders into their country, but now other countries are real peculiar about letting Chinese people into, I guess, their country. At least speaking for America, they're worried about maybe they might bring some form of new variant of the virus to the States, but that's another story. But I'm saying here, I live in Chicago, and Chicago is a sanctuary city, and like I mentioned before, this particular school now underneath Rahm Emanuel closed several neighborhood schools. This school is not particularly good enough in order to open for the purpose of education for those within that community, because I'm sure that some of those students bus out to go to school. That school is suitable enough to put amenities, showers, and I'm not trying to say, what's the word they use, xenophobic. I have to be concerned about myself and my kind and my people, and that's the necessary need for survival, and that goes for any other group of any other specific individual characteristics. And when you hear things like this, and these people didn't necessarily know, these people were lied to. They said that the people said, no, we're not going to do that. And then in the final hour, they had $1.2 million to renovate this school and do that. It's heavy, y'all, man. This story just came across the news, and I said, I need to come on and speak on this. I didn't want to get on camera. I really actually like it this way because I don't feel somewhat, as if somebody's gazing at me like that. I just really want to get to the point. But nevertheless, peace and love, y'all. I'll let y'all later.